What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tuxyboyo, and it's come to my attention that I have recently done videos criticizing Microsoft and Nintendo. And that may seem imbalanced, and it may lead you guys to believe that I am a Sony fanboy, and that I am loyal to PlayStation, and that in my eyes they can do no wrong. Well, I want you to know that that's not true. In fact, I almost hate Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo equally, and I've been saying for a long time, at least privately and amongst, friends and coworkers in my real life, that there needs to be a fourth member of the console industry. I'm not counting the Steam machine. I've already done a video about the Steam machine and how I don't think that that's going to be the thing to save the day. As much as I would love for Valve to, take that spot and put pressure on the big three, I don't see it happening, mostly because PC gaming is gonna be inaccessible for new people for a few different reasons for a little while, at least in the foreseeable future. But before we dive deep into the big three and what's wrong with each of them and why this has been the most laughable and hilariously embarrassing console generation of all time, why don't you leave a like if you also hate corporations, and while you're down there, hit subscribe. Now that I've asked you to subscribe, I wonder if it's going to do that thing where like the button lights up. I can't really verify it on my own channel, so if it does that thing, please let me know in the comments. And also, while you're down there in the comments, let me know what your favorite console of all time is, even if it's a basic answer like the PS2, original Xbox, 360, N64, GameCube, whatever it is. I want to know. Now, I want to start by talking about Nintendo, mostly because I think it's the one that hurts me the least, because I never really grew up as a Nintendo kid. I was a PlayStation and Xbox kid growing up. I had it all. I had a PS2, PS1, PS3, PS4 now, and PS5. I had an original Xbox and a 360, and I had a friend whose Xbox One I played for hundreds of hours. So those are the ones that affect me the most. So we'll start with Nintendo. A lot of it comes down to greed. Obviously, I am still rubbed the wrong way by the Switch 2 being priced at almost $500 just for the hardware itself, not including any game bundle, which is comparable to a PS5, and not really being able to deliver PS5 level performance. Even in handheld mode, it's like, oh, well, the screen is 2160, which is technically 4K, and it can theoretically give you 120 frames, but I've yet to see a game actually do that, and the console's been out for close to a year. Not only that, but also the fact that it launched with one game, which cost $80. I'm sorry, why is Mario Kart 9 priced at $80? That's ridiculous. Now, I've been saying for a long time that digital games should cost less than physical games because you don't have to share profits with the retailers, you don't have to spend money on distribution or manufacturing. That's cool, but what that doesn't mean is raise the price of the physical game. Again. Because for a long time, Nintendo was holding out. They weren't charging $70 for their games yet. Tears of the Kingdom was the first one, and that was a pretty big deal. It's like, okay, there must be something about this game that makes it worth $10 more than Mario Odyssey, Mario Wonder, Breath of the Wild, Pikmin 4, Smash Ultimate. But not really, it's kind of just the same game as the last one. And while we're talking about Zelda, this year's the 40th anniversary. Tears of the Kingdom came out 3 years ago. Theoretically, they could drop something. Let's see if they do. But on that topic, this is the third major Nintendo console to launch without a flagship Mario title. Mario Odyssey came out 6 months after the Switch 1 released. For the Switch 2, we still don't have anything announced, unless you count Mario Kart, which you shouldn't, or if you count Mario Tennis, which you shouldn't. The GameCube gave us Luigi's Mansion before Mario Sunshine came out, and I can't directly recall if Mario Galaxy was a Wii launch title. I don't think it was, but I think it did launch with Mario All-Stars. Speaking of Mario All-Stars, isn't Mario 3D All-Stars a great example of Nintendo's greed, creating artificial scarcity by only selling that collection of Mario games for a limited time? and pulling it from the digital storefront after that time was up. So now the only way that you can get it is secondhand if somebody has a physical copy of it that they're willing to sell you, which means that they can hike up the prices if it's a delisted Marvel Activision game from 20 years ago. Isn't that great? Isn't that fantastic? Not to mention how litigious they've been in the past, going after YouTubers and copyright claiming their videos for playing the music that's in the Mario Kart game. This is something that was happening all the way back when Mario Kart 8 Vanilla came out, much less Deluxe. Not to mention how difficult they make it to play certain old games on the eShop, and the old games that are available, how expensive they are, despite literally just being emulated ROMs that you could pull from coolrom.com if that website still exists. The same type of ROMs that I had on my school-issued laptop when I was 15 years old. Yeah, Fire Red and Leaf Green, give me $40. $40. And it's like, well, it could have cost more. Great. You know, if someone cuts your finger off, just remember the fact that they could have cut off your entire hand. You should feel grateful for the fact that they didn't do that. Isn't it also kind of crazy that they sold a $10 virtual tour of their console for you to just walk around this video game version of their video game console to learn how it works internally? Let me ask you something. Do you care? Do you care about that? Do you give a good goddamn about that? I don't think you do. And we could talk about how many franchises that they've let sit on the shelf, and that's really a problem with the entire big three. Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo all have several franchises that are sitting on the shelf collecting dust. The fact that Metroid Prime 4 took nearly 8 years to release after its announcement and runs so poorly and is such a poorly received game that pretty much only came out on the Switch 1 out of obligation is abysmal. It's beyond that. It's apocryphal. You know, I find it hard to believe that one of their most beloved franchises is being treated like this. And let's talk about the monetization practices happening over at Nintendo. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that they fixed their Joy-Con problem, the Joy-Con drift problem that they were having with the Switch 1. I doubt it, but let's assume that they did fix it. Let's say down the line your controller just stops working, you know, and you have to replace it. Well, you could just, you know, shell out a couple dollars for a replacement. Surely it's not ridiculously priced. There's no reason that a Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con would be the most expensive default controller on the market, right? It's $100. It's $100. The DualSense can be $70 to $75. Cool. I believe that the Xbox Series X controller is about $70 to $75 as well. Why could the Joy-Con 2 be so much more expensive? Is it because it has a new mouse mode? Even the Pro controller for the Switch 2, which you might use if you're playing Smash Brothers, for example, is $90. Still more expensive than the DualSense. There's also a new feature with the Switch 2. There's a button on the controller that you can use to engage voice chat. But you can't use voice chat unless you pay for Nintendo Switch Online. So there's a physical button on the controller that is useless to you unless you fork up more money on top of what you spend on the console, on top of what you spend on the game. That's insane to me. That's insane to me. You can use the share button on PS5 without paying for PlayStation Plus. So what's going on? There's also a video chat feature. We've got Skype on the Switch 2, you guys. It's 2008 all over again. $55 for their proprietary camera. Isn't that great? Or you can get one that looks like a piranha plant for $60. There's a Virtual Boy headset available for the Switch 2. Don't you want to play Virtual Boy games? $100. I mean, I am in disbelief because I find it laughable that there is any sort of significant overlap between people who know what the Virtual Boy is and people who own a Switch 2. Because if the Virtual Boy had been that popular, You probably would have been able to release more than a dozen games for it. Are you punishing me because you had a failed console almost 30 years ago? Because that's not my fault. It was just a bad idea. You know? It's just... I don't know. Between that and the DRM and people getting banned over their usernames to the point where it's like it's damn near an IP ban and your entire console gets bricked. Whatever. This was a company that used to bring people so much joy. You know? Star Fox fans, how are we feeling? F-Zero fans, how are we feeling? Smash fans, how are we feeling? It's been 7 years since your last game came out. You know, almost 5 years since your last character came out. How are you feeling? You know? Kid Icarus fans, how are you feeling? Zelda fans, how are you feeling? And I know, you guys just had a game 3 years ago, but if you like Link to the Past type of games, or Ocarina of Time type of games, probably starving right now. And I'm sorry. I really am. But that's enough about Nintendo right now. Let's put the other Japanese company up on the chopping board. Are they even Japanese anymore? Let's talk about Sony. So, Sony has a track record of making questionable decisions as well. Not quite on the same level as Nintendo, but looking at it from the outside, it can seem to be almost just as bad. So let's talk about that for a minute. One of the first things I want to talk about is the PS5 and the fact that there's a PS5 Pro that is $200 more expensive if you're willing to play only digital, and $300 more expensive if you want to play your physical games that you already own. Now, sure, there was a PS4 Pro, but you want to know how much it retailed for? $399. You want to know how much the PS4 Vanilla retailed for? $399. You want to know how much the PS4 Slim 1TB retailed for? $399. So where is this almost 100% price premium coming from? I have no idea. What does the PS5 Pro actually do for you? Higher frame rates? AI upscaling? Man, I'm so glad I forked up almost $1,000 for this machine. I can't express how happy I am about that. But let's talk about more of the you know, decision making that's been going on over there. First of all, one of the worst things that they ever did was shut down Sony Japan. I don't understand how Sony Japan can cease to exist within PlayStation. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I know that I mentioned earlier that all three companies are guilty of leaving franchises on the shelf, but it feels particularly egregious when you look at Sony, because most of these companies still exist. Sucker Punch is no longer interested in making Infamous or Sly Cooper anymore. That's totally fine. Sell off the IP, like you did with Crash Bandicoot. You know, Naughty Dog doesn't want to make Jak and Daxter anymore. They don't even want to make Uncharted anymore. That's cool. Other companies have made Uncharted content before. If Ben Studio wants to make a Days Gone 2, or if they want to make another spin-off of something, let them do it. Why are we not allowing games to continue to exist within the zeitgeist? Obviously, these M-rated single-player experiences are doing well. Ghost of Tsushima and Ghost of Yotei are both very successful. God of War, very successful. The Last of Us, very successful. Days Gone, successful enough. Death Stranding, very successful. I get it. But that doesn't mean... I mean, look at Astrobot. Right? Astrobot sold over 2 million copies. Now, that's not a crazy huge number, but I think it's enough to show you that there is still interest in things like maybe Little Big Planet. Nobody wants to play Sackboy's Big Adventure, but if you made a Little Big Planet 4, I'm willing to bet people would still play it. Even if you did want to make adult content, adult, mature-themed content still, you could release another Twisted Metal. You have a TV show based on Twisted Metal that's got a second season. Where is the game to capitalize on that success? You can make another Siphon Filter if you wanted to do that. But I think people out there would even like a new Parappa the Rapper. You know, I find it hard to believe that when you look at the PS1 and the PS2 and even the PS3, the question of who's like that generation's mascot actually has a compelling discussion behind it. And then you look at the PS4 and PS5 and you ask who's the mascot of that generation, and it's Kratos for both of them. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that just great? You know, Ratchet and Clank, it might be one of the most heartbreaking examples because we did get 2 recent games from them. Within the last 10 years, there have been 2 Ratchet and Clank games. There was one for the PS4 to tie in and promote that movie. Which, by the way, there was a Sly Cooper movie that was supposed to come out too. He canceled that because of the Ratchet and Clank movie not doing well. Well, you made a tie-in game for Ratchet and Clank. Where's the tie-in game for Sly Cooper? You could have at least released that. Did you not work on one? Why wouldn't you do that? But there are 5 years between Ratchet and Clank PS4 and Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart for the PS5. It's now been almost 5 years since Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart came out, and there's been no announcement of another Ratchet and Clank game. If RNC Rift Apart didn't do well enough to warrant another game, I can understand that. What I don't like is the idea that Insomniac will now only be making Marvel games. Because you somehow let the budget of Spider-Man 2 balloon to almost $400 million. Let that sink in. Spider-Man 2 for the PS5 cost more to develop than any Spider-Man movie has ever cost to make. Its budget was similar to that of Justice League 2017. Similar to that of Avengers Infinity War. It exceeds that of your average Star Wars film post Phantom Menace, when they started getting more and more expensive every time. And what do you have to show for it? Hours and hours of cut content. You can feel the fact that the game's not ready when you play it. And that was a game that needed to do well because it only released on the PS5 at launch. Let's talk about that aspect for a second too. Obviously, the PS5 was difficult to get your hands on when it first came out. That's no lie, and it's no secret. Everybody's aware of that. So it was admirable for Sony to say, you know what, we'll continue to release games on the PS4 for a little while to give people time to get their hands on a PS5, and it'll make the transition easier. Well, it's been 5 years, and games are still releasing on the PS4. In fact, when you look at 5 years post PS4 releasing, what did you have? You had Uncharted 4, Order 1886 for better or for worse, Knack for better or for worse, Killzone Shadowfall, Horizon Zero Dawn, Spider-Man, Shadow of the Colossus, God of War, Detroit Become Human, Bloodborne, Infamous Second Son, Days Gone if you want to push it a little further. None of those games were available on the PS3. Let's look at the PS5. Horizon Forbidden West, available on PS4. God of War Ragnarok, available on PS4. Spider-Man Miles Morales, available on PS4. Sackboy Big Adventure, available on PS4. Gran Turismo 7, available on PS4. Are you seeing the pattern? Well, it's great that Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, Spider-Man 2, and Returnal are only on PS5? That's great. That's really good. Why is the list so small in comparison? I get that games take way too long to develop now. That's a whole different thing. That's not strictly a Sony problem. But what are we even looking at here? We're kneecapping these games. Oh, well, I'm confident that Marvel's Wolverine won't be on PS4. But that doesn't really undo the fact that this has been an utterly wasted generation now, does it? Because Naughty Dog has been releasing at least one game per generation since the PS1, and they're going to miss the PS5. Well, what do you mean they're going to miss the PS5? They announced a game in 2024. Yeah, they sure did. Intergalactic, The Last Heretic, whatever that game's called. Do you really think that game's coming out on for the PS5? It might release on the PS5, but that's a PS6 game. That's the first PS6 game that we saw. We're at a point in time now where if you look at the most recent state of play, there's a pretty good chance that most of those games that they showed that don't have release dates yet or are still early in development Most of those games are for the PS6. John Wick is probably for the PS6. The God of War trilogy remake is probably for the PS6. And what does the PS5 really have to show for it? Mostly games that are available on the PS4 as well. What are we talking about? How is it even possible? Not to mention all the projects that have been shuttered. They closed down Blue Point, so now even if we could have possibly had like Sly Cooper remakes or Jack and Dexter remakes or something like that, the studio that would have been the guys to do it no longer exist. And now that Blue Point's gone, who the hell is making the God of War remakes? Oh, Demon's Souls is a PS5 exclusive. Thanks, Blue Point. It gave us one of the very few actual PS5 exclusive games that exist. I don't care that the games are landing on on PC after some time. That's cool. That's great. That's not my problem. The problem is, we're holding onto the PS4 for dear life, when there's 90 million PS5s that have been sold. It's time to let go. It is time to let go. We've already exceeded the number of PS3s that were sold. How many flagship PS3 games were available on PS2? I struggle to see the logic. Speaking of failing to see logic, they bought Bungie for almost $4 billion to teach their other in-house development studios how to make live service games. And even after the abysmal failure that was Concord, that they put all of their eggs in, that was gonna be their golden ticket. That was their next 10 years of Sony, was Concord. They're still committed to live service. And I took the liberty of pulling up a list of live service games that had died or were considered failures before Concord came out, because Sony should have known. So we've got Anthem, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, Marvel's Avengers, Knockout City, Hyperscape, which I've never even heard of, Evolve, Foam Stars, which Sony published. You tried to compete with Splatoon and you got demolished. Lawbreakers, what else is there on here? Radical Heights, I don't even remember that. Paragon, no clue what that is. What was the one game? Babylon's Fall. There's so many examples of live service games that die on arrival. It's actually shocking when you have something like Arc Raiders or Helldivers 2 that comes out and has legs and is successful and is popular, and they're learning all of the wrong lessons from it. I thought when they bought Bungie it was for Destiny, but no, they're making Marathon. I'm sorry, who out here is excited about Marathon? Oh, what about Fair Games? Aren't you just chopping at the bit for Fair Games? Why has there been no Astrobot 2 announcement? How long can it take to make an Astrobot game? You mean to tell me that 2 years post-launch you can't say that you're working on a new one? That game won Game of the Year, for crying out loud. You don't want to say anything? I don't get it. I don't get it. Between all the layoffs and the absolute slop that you're seeing on the PlayStation Store now, it feels as though nobody's actually running the company anymore. And that's really frustrating. That's like heartbreaking. But that leaves us with just one last whale to harpoon. Let's talk about Microsoft, because this one's been going for a long, long time. Now, another reason that it feels appropriate to make a video like this is because Phil Spencer recently stepped down as head of Xbox. I don't think he would really do that before the 25th anniversary, though. I think he was probably fired. And then his replacement was also fired, so there's a replacement for the replacement now. That happened really quickly. But this comes off the heels of this just being the worst generation that Microsoft has ever had in the console sphere. Now, they only ever had one truly successful generation, and that's the Xbox 360, because the Xbox got its ass beat by the GameCube and the PS2, I believe. And the Xbox 360 did dominate the 6th generation, or no, the 7th generation for quite some time, and then it eventually did lose to the Wii and the PS3. But, you know, there were a lot of hardware problems there, and we don't really need to talk too much about that. And the Xbox One kind of shot itself in the foot before it ever had a chance to try and succeed. But once Phil Spencer took over, things kind of started to look up. You know, Xbox Game Pass came out, and it was a great service, a great product, and it was really what they needed. They started focusing on true backwards compatibility, which neither Nintendo or Sony could offer because Nintendo had switched to cartridges, so your Wii, GameCube, Wii U discs became artifacts instantly. PS4 had no backwards compatibility whatsoever, and even now the PS5 is only backwards compatible to the PS4. The Xbox Series X can play original Xbox games. I think that's great. Now, it's not true backwards compatibility in most cases. It works in a very proprietary, interesting way, but it still works. And that's the important thing. But, I mean, we're looking at the worst sales numbers that they've ever put up. Costco from Washington won't sell Xboxes made by Microsoft, which is also from Washington. That's a damn shame. And across two different Xbox consoles priced $200 apart from each other, combined they can't, you know, compete with the PS5. And it doesn't help that they have no content coming out. And they haven't had content coming out for a long time. What have they had this generation? Hi-Fi Rush. That was actually a really great game. So great that instead of greenlighting and funding a sequel, they shut down the studio. The studio that also made The Evil Within. So Evil Within is gone as well. That's great. They bought Bethesda. And so you've got Starfield. No new Fallout. No new Elder Scrolls. And the most recent Doom game still launched on PS5. And Deathloop, which was like the first high-profile game to come out of Bethesda after the acquisition, was PS5 and PC exclusive at first. It didn't even launch on Xbox. That's kind of weird. Assuming that Blade game is still coming out, that's probably going to be on PS5 as well. You know, they acquired Activision. That's big. That's the Overwatch Call of Duty company. They got Diablo now. Well, you can't exactly afford to not release Call of Duty on PS5, where you'll have a much larger install base than you do on your own platform. So it doesn't really amount to much either. We're shuttering studios left and right. What do they have coming out? Oh yeah, Halo Campaign Evolved, which is going to strip back all of the extra content from Halo Combat Evolved. It's just going to be the campaign. That's available on PlayStation when it comes out. Isn't that great? Halo, which was also, you know, run into the ground. We also have Forza Motorsport, which had its plug pulled for no good reason. When, really, you look at the racing scene, it needs competition now more than ever. Drive Club is gone. Need for Speed isn't what it used to be. Midnight Club is gone. Gran Turismo isn't what it used to be. You know, Burnout is gone. Ridge Racer is gone. Daytona is gone. What are you going to play? F1? You going to play NASCAR? What do we have now? Nothing. We've got Forza Horizon. We've got Gran Turismo. Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Fable was announced 6 years ago, and it's maybe coming out this year. Avowed took forever to come out after its announcement and then died immediately. Elder Scrolls 6 was announced in 2018. That's Microsoft's problem now. 8 years and nothing. That's a damned shame. You know? I mean, Redfall killed the studio that made it. Because, surprise, surprise, Arcane doesn't know anything about making live service games. They make single-player experiences. Isn't that great? They've gone the way of Sony. Which is heartbreaking. Xbox Game Pass is more expensive than it was, or has any right to be, really. I mean, it's I'm not even picking on Xbox. You know, it's just, it's impossible to get excited about anything that they have coming down the pipeline. Because A, we barely know what's coming down the pipeline. We know that we've got a Halo remake, we've got Fable 5, I think, right? And we've got, I don't know, Fallout 5 when that comes out, maybe? Elder Scrolls 6 when that comes out, maybe? If those games ever come to exist? At least over at Nintendo, we know that there are games coming. At least over at Sony, we know that there are games coming. I don't know what Xbox is doing. I don't even know if there's gonna be another Xbox console after this. It's entirely possible that we're witnessing the end of the Xbox brand. And that's terrifying, because that's the worst thing that could happen for the gaming industry right now, is having fewer major players in it. Because that, when you give up market share like that, you tell Sony and Nintendo that they can do whatever they want. You have to make them sweat. You have to make them panic. And I knew Phil Spencer's heart wasn't in it anymore when he said that they were never going to out-console Sony or Nintendo. But you've done it before. You were out-consoling Sony for years. You out-consoled Nintendo throughout the entire run of the Wii U. All you have to do is give people games you want to play on a machine that they want to play them on. I'm not even going to talk about the Xbox's UI and how it's gone into the fucking dumpster over the last decade, because that's not the point of this video. I cannot believe that Microsoft has thrown in the towel. Sony is shooting themselves in the foot with bad decisions. They're not intentionally giving up. They're not giving away ground to the competition, to their competitors. Microsoft is giving up. They quit. They don't want to play anymore. They want their mom. And I can't believe that. This is why I'm saying we need a fourth guy. We need someone to put pressure on these companies and make them, wake up, because they've gotten complacent and they've gotten lazy and they've gotten comfortable, because they know that they make the only platform that you can go to get certain things. Microsoft doesn't have that anymore. And that's why they gave up. I want Sega or Atari or somebody new to show up and start doing something that makes them scared. Google tried. Amazon tried. Ouya tried. But they just couldn't make it happen. But I don't believe that means nobody can. Somebody has to be able to. I just don't know how. And I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear that it's going to be the Steam machine. Because it's not. The Steam machine is going to cost easily over $1,000. Not even factoring in the RAM problems that we're having, regardless, that thing would cost over $1,000. Because look at how much the Valve Index costs. If this thing is supposed to compete with consoles and play these games at a high level, Valve's going to want to make money. So the machine's going to be expensive, regardless. But we're looking at problems with storage and with memory. So that's going to drive up the price even more. And now they don't even make Steam Decks anymore. I did this video to talk about the big three, but it's really the big four that have problems. Because Valve isn't going to come out of this whole thing smelling like a rose either. But I've rambled for over a half hour. I say everything that I've said to say that I am crestfallen, to say the least, with the current state of the video game industry, particularly from the big three console manufacturers. I don't think console is dead or dying. That's ridiculous to say when, like I said, 90 million people have bought a PS5, millions of people have bought a Switch 2, and those numbers are just going to keep going up. But you have to give people a reason to want to buy your machine. Microsoft can't do that anymore. That's why they're falling by the wayside. As of right now, Sony and Nintendo are still capable of doing that. But, they're burning all customer loyalty that they have right now. And it seems like they're completely fine with that. So who knows what the landscape is going to look like in 10 years. Because at the end of the day, Nintendo does still understand that making content for the family will always be more profitable. And that's why the Wii was so successful, and why the Switch was so successful, and why the Switch 2 will probably continue to be extraordinarily successful. And maybe 10 years from now, Nintendo will stand alone. And they'll make your cars, and they'll fund the police and the military-industrial complex, and they'll make their own Bibles, and we're going to be living in RoboCop, but instead of omni-consumer products, it's Nintendo. And we all have to wear a red hat with an M on it, and you have to say, let's go when you go to work. And we're all going to work at Nintendo, and so will your dad. If you got that joke, let me know in the comments. Anyway, that's enough dooming. I'm going to go to bed. I'll see you later.